Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth. Let's get into it. Before this story starts, hold on to one rule. Betrayal does not become noble just because somebody explains it calmly. When a partner asks you to bless the very thing that would break your trust, the red flag is not only the request, it is the way they try to make your pain sound immature. That distinction matters more than people think. If you've ever heard somebody dress up betrayal as honesty, stay with me, because this fiancé cheating story goes somewhere cold and real. Hit like, share this with someone who needs a reminder about boundaries, and subscribe for more original relationship drama and cheating revenge stories like this one. I will marry you, Imani said, sitting across from me at our kitchen table. But I need one last night with Adrian before I can do that honestly. She said it in the same voice she used to remind me we were low on dish soap. Calm, organized, almost managerial. Outside, March rain slid down the front windows of my row house in Mount Airy, and the old SEPTA bus on the avenue exhaled at the curb like it was tired of Philadelphia too. I had one hand on my grandfather's mantel clock, winding the key, and I stopped halfway. The clock gave a weak click and then silence, like even it had decided not to participate. I looked at her for a long time, not because I did not understand the sentence, but because I understood it too well. Imani sat there in a cream sweater, hair pulled back, her nails a soft gray she had picked because it went with everything. She had a legal pad beside her. A legal pad. That is the part one remembers most. She had written notes for this conversation. I am telling you because I respect you, she said. I did not want to walk into marriage with unfinished feelings. My mouth went dry. You want permission? She held my eyes. I want honesty. My name is Micah Sutton. I was 37 that spring, and I repaired clocks and watches in the same narrow Germantown shop my grandfather opened in 1968. I had been engaged to Imani Clark for 11 months, and our wedding was 7 Saturdays away. We had a greenhouse booked near Fairmount Park, a jazz trio lemon cake, and invitations already stacked in my shop office waiting for stamps. We had registry links, linen samples, and a whole future built out in sensible little boxes. Then the woman I planned to marry asked me to bless one last night with a man she claimed was behind her. That was the sentence that split my life into before and after. I met Imani on a cold Saturday in November at the Germantown Library's Community Appraisal Day. People brought in old jewelry, silver sets, cracked watches, family pieces they did not trust pawn shops with. I had volunteered a folding table, a loop, and my hands. She showed up carrying a velvet pouch like it held a secret. Inside was a gold pocket watch with a scratch case and a tiny chip near the stem. It was my grandfather's, she said. It stopped the week we buried him. She was not dramatic. She said it flat, but her thumb kept rubbing that chip. I told her to leave it with me for an hour. When she came back, I had the watch ticking again. Nothing major. Old oil, dust, and one bent tooth in the gear train. I handed it to her, and she put it against her ear before she even thanked me. Then she smiled, slow and surprised, like relief had snuck up on her. You fix things gently, she said. That was her first real sentence to me. We ended up across the street at a diner with red booths and weak coffee, talking until the lunch crowd turned over. She worked at the Mosaic Arts Collective downtown, planning donor events and youth programs. I told her clocks made more sense to me than people because at least clocks admitted when they were off. We built ourselves in ordinary ways. Friday fish from the carryout on Shelton. Sunday afternoons at her mother's Baptist church in West Philly, where the ushers still wore white gloves and the choir never sang softly. Late summer walks in Wissahickon, when the trees made everything feel older and kinder. She liked paper planters, fresh tulips, and keeping cumin, paprika, and garlic powder in identical glass jars with neat labels. I liked routines, quiet work, and buttering toast over the sink because I hated crumbs on the floor. She laughed at that the first time she stayed over. "You're 80 years old in spirit," she told me. She meant it fondly then. I proposed in early December on a footbridge above the creek in Wissahickon Valley Park with my hands freezing through my gloves and my heart pounding harder than it had any right to. The first frost had silvered the edges of everything. I had hidden the ring box inside my coat pocket. So long the velvet was warm. Imani cried before I finished the question. She nodded first, then said yes, then laughed at herself for doing it out of order. Afterward, we went to a little spot near the avenue for soup and cornbread, and she kept staring at her hand under the hanging lights like she had been let into a room she had wanted all her life. We were not a perfect couple. I am too slow to anger, which sounds noble until you live with it. Slowness can turn into avoidance. I grew up in a loud house with a father who treated volume like authority, and somewhere along the way I decided silence was the holier option. Imani was more direct. She liked issues on the table, receipts and folders, plans named and dated. If a lamp flickered, she did not just notice it. She bought the bulb. If I got anxious, I lined tiny screws in straight rows on my work mat and pretended concentration was peaceful. Still, our mismatches used to fit together well. The first crack came in January when the Mosaic hired a photographer for their spring fundraising campaign. Imani mentioned his name while rinsing greens at the sink. "Adrian's back in the city," she said, like she was reporting the weather. I knew the name. Adrian Tate, her college boyfriend, the one I knew in outline only. First serious love. Too much chemistry. Too much ego. He had moved to Los Angeles years ago because opportunity called, and apparently opportunity had recently called him back. He's shooting the portraits for the campaign, she said. Small world. She shrugged, but she chopped the stems off the collards 3 times harder than necessary. At first, I did what people do when they want peace more than truth. I filed the discomfort away and called it maturity. She was busier than usual with gala planning. I was buried in repair orders after Christmas. We were both tired. But then little things started changing shape. Her phone began living face down. She used to read me funny donor emails while brushing her teeth. Now she carried her phone from room to room like it needed supervision. The gospel humming she did while cleaning stopped. She bought lemon verbena perfume she only wore for late meetings. And when I touched her lower back passing behind her in the kitchen, sometimes she flinched first and smiled second. I noticed all of it, and I still made excuses. That part embarrasses me more now than I enjoy admitting. Her mother had been dealing with high blood pressure, and I knew family stress sat heavy on Imani. The gala budget was a mess, and she had been covering for a useless board member who liked ideas but not invoices. I told myself this was adulthood. I told myself partnership meant giving a person room. One Tuesday, while I was closing the shop, my barber Calvin leaned over the back of my chair and said, "You look like a man arguing with himself." I laughed it off. He did not. "Do not let confusion move into your house," he said. Calvin's shop sat 2 doors down from mine, and it was one of those places where sports arguments, grief politics, and fatherhood all got the same amount of floor time. The Clippers buzzed. Somebody's little boy played with a broom in the corner, and the TV over the mirror stayed muted, because Calvin said men needed to hear one another sometimes. I told him Imani was just stressed. He snapped his cape once, sharp. "Maybe," he said, "but stressed people ask for sleep and help. They do not start acting like they owe their phone money." I remember smiling like he was joking. I remember my chest tightening, because I knew he was not. The first hard evidence came by accident. I was at home printing label sheets for the invitations when Imani came in from the shower and tossed her tote onto the couch. Her laptop slid halfway out. The screen lit when it hit the cushion. I was not snooping. I need that said plainly. I was reaching for the printer cable when a message preview opened in the corner. "Still owe me a proper goodbye. M. Adrian." I froze. Not because of the words exactly, but because of the lightness in them. Familiar. Assured. When Imani came back in, she saw my face, lunged to the laptop, and said my name too fast. "It is not what you think," she said, which is one of those sentences that always tells you it is at least adjacent to what you think. I asked a simple question. "Why does he think he owes you anything?" She pressed her lips together. "We have been talking. That is all." Then she said they had met for coffee after one of the portrait sessions because it felt strange not to. Then she said she needed closure. That word entered our house weeks before the real conversation did. Closure. I hated it immediately. It sounded like a clean lid over something messy and warm. I also hated how fast I turned inward, looking for what I had failed to provide. For a while, I blamed my own steadiness. That is another thing betrayal can do if you are not careful. It can make you interrogate your virtues like they are defects. I started thinking maybe I had become too predictable, too settled, too much grandfather and not enough spark. Maybe the shop, the routines, the early nights had made me bored. One evening at the diner where we first met, Imani stirred her tea so long the spoon clicked against the cup like a nervous tell. "Can love survive one mistake?" she asked, not looking up. I said, "Depends what kind." She gave a small shrug. "The kind people make before marriage because they are scared." The full conversation came 3 nights later at our kitchen table. The rain slick on the windows, the legal pad between us. "I need to know I am choosing this marriage freely," she said. Adrian and I never really finished. He left, and I pretended I was over it. I am not asking to start anything with him. I am asking for one night to put it down for good. I stared at the legal pad because it was easier than staring at her. She had bullet points. Bullet points. She had organized betrayal into talking points. A night, I repeated. What does that mean exactly? Her eyes held for 1 second, then dropped. "I think you know." "No," I said. "Say it clearly so I do not help you sanitize it." That made her flinch. "I need one last night with my ex," she said quietly. "Then I can marry you without this hanging over me." The kitchen got so still I could hear the radiator tick in the front room. "You want me to fund a wedding after that?" I asked. "Do not make it ugly," she whispered. "I am trying to keep it honest." I laughed once, and it came out dry and mean. Honesty would have been shutting the door when the feelings came back. Honesty would have happened before hotel plans, before bullet points, before you practiced the speech. I did not yell. People always think restraint means weakness, but sometimes restraint is the last thing holding you upright. I stood, pushed my chair in, and walked to the sink because I needed my hand somewhere. The dish rack still held the blue mug she used every morning. One of her tulips had dropped a petal on the counter. Life looked offensively normal. When I asked, "Friday, you made a plan already." She started crying then, not loud, just angry tears. I needed to know if you could handle one hard conversation without turning into every insecure man I ever dated. I turned around. "So this is a test now?" She said nothing. That answered enough. I put on my coat and left before I said something only pain would enjoy. Rain had turned the sidewalks black and shiny. The corner store still had its metal gate halfway down, and somebody inside was mopping the old R&B from a radio that crackled on the high notes. I walked all the way to Wayne Junction and back, hands open in my pockets, breathing like I had outrun something. I could have called her mother. I could have called my pastor, my cousins, every man in Calvin's shop, and turned our private reckon to A, public theater. I did not. I chose, right there in Wet City air, not to crowd my pain with an audience. Instead, I called my older sister, Joelle. She teaches 10th grade English, runs on peppermint tea, and has a voice that can make a lie confess halfway through itself. She listened without interrupting, which made it worse somehow. Then she said, "Micah, listen to me carefully. Do not audition for your own disrespect." I leaned against the bus shelter and shut my eyes. Maybe I should have seen this sooner. "That is not a useful question," she said. "The useful question is what you're going to permit now." I asked her if ending an engagement over a request was too severe. She answered so fast it almost hurt. "No, the request is a betrayal." The next morning, Imani had already made coffee before I came downstairs. That, more than anything, made me tired. I did not want tenderness after that conversation. I did not want domestic camouflage laid over a fracture. She set a mug near my elbow. "I know last night was awful," she said, "but I need you to see the difference between secrecy and truth." I looked at her for a long second. "If you go on Friday, there is no wedding. Her face changed slowly, like she had expected pain but not consequence. You are giving me an ultimatum. No, I said, I am giving you the shape of reality. She sat down hard. You are punishing me for telling the truth. Imani, I said, and even then I kept my voice level because I wanted to remember myself later. You are not being punished for honesty. You are being answered for what your honesty revealed. She covered her mouth and cried into her hand. I wish I could say that moved me cleanly, but what I felt was layered and ugly. Love was there. So was a pity. So was anger. So was a humiliating knowledge that some part of her had already gone elsewhere and wanted me to sponsor the trip. Please do not make me choose under pressure, she said. You chose before you brought me the legal pad. That afternoon, I closed the shop early and handled what needed handling. I went first to the bank because we had a wedding savings account with both our names on it and months of careful deposits inside. I sat with a woman in a navy blazer while she explained what could be moved without either of us pretending later that the math had been dishonest. I took my half and left hers. Then I printed the ledger, every dollar, every transfer. I did not want one shadow of financial confusion added to emotional wreckage. After that, I called the travel agency and paused a honeymoon reservation. My voice sounded professional. My hands were not. Back at the house, I pulled garment boxes from the shop storage room and began packing her things in categories because disorder would have made me feel crueler. Work dresses first, then shoes and their fabric bags, then the stack of museum postcards she kept banded by color on the bookshelf. Her glass spice jars I left alone because something about touching cumin and smoked paprika felt too intimate. I found the cardigan she wore on our first Christmas and sat on the bed with it in my lap, longer than I want to admit. Grief does not arrive grand. Sometimes it is just staring at a cardigan and feeling your chest go hollow. The calls to vendors were worse than the bank. The greenhouse coordinator sounded genuinely sad. I'm so sorry, she said after I told her the date would not be needed. The jazz trio leader asked if we wanted to reschedule. I swallowed and said no. Our pastor went silent for a while, then asked only one question. Are you safe in your spirit to make this decision? I said I was trying to be. The baker had already ordered candied lemon peel for the cake. The invitation designer had the envelopes ready. Every call was another small funeral. By evening, my throat hurt from saying versions of the same sentence. The wedding will not be happening. There were a dozen smaller revenge fantasies available to me, and I considered more than one. I could have emailed every guest and included receipts. I could have called her board chair and told the story exactly as it unfolded. I could have posted one elegant, devastating sentence online and let the city feast on it. Philadelphia is not as large as it thinks. News moves through black families and church circles like heat through old pipes. I chose not to do any of that. I left her privacy intact where I could, not because she had earned protection, but because I did not want my hurt teaching me a cheap version of manhood. Friday came bright and cold after all that rain. The sky scrubbed hard blue. I worked at the shop until 4, then came home to find Imani getting ready upstairs. I stood in the bedroom doorway while she adjusted an earring in the mirror. She wore a rust-colored dress I had bought her for our engagement dinner, and gold hoops her mother gave her for 30. Her hair was pressed sleek and tucked behind one ear. She turned and looked at me with a face that held shame and hope together in a way I had never seen before. I hate this, she said softly. Then do not go, I said. She picked up her clutch. I need to know. Know what? I asked whether the life I am about to choose is real, because I chose it, not because it was a safer option. That sentence did something final inside me, not the part about Adrian, the part about me. Safer option. That was how she had translated my loyalty, my steadiness, my love, a reasonable selection. On her wrist was a pocket watch I had repaired the day we met, fastened to a leather strap she bought online, because she liked wearing old things in new ways. I almost laughed at the insult. Take your time, I said, but when you come back, do not expect me to still be standing where you left me. After she left, I did not pace. I went to the shop and took apart a French carriage clock that had been giving me trouble for weeks. Tiny screws, fine springs, work that punished wandering thoughts. Outside the front window, Germantown Avenue slid into the evening. School kids half running to buses, a man dragging 2 grocery bags to the wind, the halal cart on the corner sending up steam that blurred the light. Calvin came over after closing and stood in my doorway without asking questions. We ate cheesesteaks from wax paper and watched the avenue dim. Around 10, he said, "Whatever happens next, do not negotiate with what you already know." Then he left me with the lights on. I slept at Joel's that night because I did not want to sit in the row house listening for keys. Her place in West Oak Lane smelled like cinnamon and copier paper because she grated everything at her kitchen table. She made me sit on the couch and eat peach cobbler out of a bowl, while her teenage son pretended not to listen from the hallway. "You can still backslide tomorrow," she said. Pain likes to call itself compassion. I nodded because that sounded true enough to bruise. Around 1 in the morning, my phone buzzed once. I did not check it. I knew whatever was on that screen would either be too little or too late. I got back to the house just after 8. Imani was sitting on the front steps in the same rust-colored dress with my spare key in her lap and mascara gone at the corners. She looked smaller than usual, not physically, but in spirit, like certainty had leaked out of her overnight. She stood when she saw me. I tried to call. I unlocked the door without answering and let her follow me in. The garment boxes were lined along the wall. The wedding binder was gone from the shelf. The ledger from the bank sat on the table beside an envelope with her half of the savings account information. She stared at it all and went pale. "Micah," she said, almost whispering. "Wait." I kept my coat on. "Did you go?" She swallowed. "Yes." "Did you stay?" Her eyes filled. "Yes." I nodded once. "That was all. Nothing happened the way you are imagining." She rushed out. We talked for hours. We kissed. It felt wrong. I left. I remember how carefully she said kisses, like that word might somehow pass for restraint. And what exactly am I supposed to do with that distinction? I asked. She shook her head hard. "I chose you. That is what I came home to tell you." I looked around the room. "You are too late to bring me a choice after spending the night making one." Then her anger arrived, because sometimes anger is shamed with shoes on. "So that is it?" she snapped. "Years together, and you throw all of it away because I was honest about confusion?" I laughed, tired and cold. "No, I am ending it because you wanted me to help lower my own standards so you could feel enlightened." Her face twisted. "You are making this ugly." "No," I said. "Ugly was asking your fiancé to hold still while you checked whether your old desire still had a pulse." She turned away, pressing both hands to her temples. "I thought if I came back and told you the truth, we could rebuild." I answered before she finished. "We cannot." She called her mother from the kitchen, and I heard the break in her voice when she said the wedding was off. About 20 minutes later, her cousin Tasha pulled up outside in a silver SUV with gospel playing low through the open window. Tasha came in all business, hugged Imani, looked at me once with an expression I could not read, and started carrying boxes. There was no shouting, no lamp breaking, no neighbors gathering in robes. Just cardboard footsteps and the sound of my front door opening and closing over and over. Before she left, Imani slipped off the engagement ring and set it on the table beside the bank envelope. It made the smallest sound I had ever heard from grief. Her mother called me that evening. Mrs. Clark had always spoken like she was trying not to bruise anyone. That day her voice sounded wrung out. "I am not calling to change your mind," she said. "I just needed to say I am sorry for the hurt." I stood in my kitchen holding the phone and looking at the empty space on the shelf where Imani's cookbooks had been. "Thank you," I said. "I did love your daughter." She drew in a breath that sounded almost like a sob. "I know. That is part of what makes this so foolish." I never told her details. I said only, she stepped outside what we promised each other. That was enough. The next few weeks were a slow public unwinding. The bridal shower her aunts had rented a church hall for got canceled. My uncles returned suit measurements with too much silence. Friends called trying to sound casual and failed. At Calvin's shop, nobody pushed for gossip. They just handed me a bottle of water, made room in a chair, and talked about basketball until I could hear my own breathing again. I never posted anything online. When people asked, I kept it plain. The engagement ended because our values stopped matching. Some thought I was being too gentle. Maybe I was. But I had no desire to perform my wound for people who only liked drama when it was not theirs. Work saved me more than prayer did that season, and I am a church-raised man, so that is not a small confession. I hired a summer apprentice early, a 16-year-old named Nico from the neighborhood who had narrow shoulders, fast hands, and more patience than he understood yet. He came in after school and listened hard. I taught him how not to force a stuck crown, how to hear when a movement was dry, how to respect tiny things that could be ruined by hurry. There was something honest about explaining repair to a boy who still believed broken things could be brought back if you learned enough. I did not tell him some things should not be. News about Imani came to me sideways, the way news always does in a city stitched together by cousins and church women and people who once sat beside you at a repast. Adrian was still shooting campaign work, still smiling in rooms full of people like he owned the light. Imani had taken leave from the Mosaic after the gala because the board did not like scandals near fundraising season, even quiet scandals. She was staying with Tasha for a while, then apparently splitting time between there and Adrian's loft. When I heard that, I waited with jealousy. What came instead was sadness so dull it barely had edges. She had traded certainty for momentum and was still calling it freedom. The refund checks arrived in pieces. Catering, partial venue return, travel credit converted to cash after fee that felt insulting in its timing. I lined them up on my workbench one afternoon and realized I had a choice about what those dollars would mean. I could let them sit there as a monument to embarrassment, or I could put them somewhere my grief could not rot. I used part of the money to replace the cracked front display window in the shop and buy a second workbench. The rest I put toward a paid apprenticeship fund in my grandfather's name so Nico could stay through the fall. It was the cleanest revenge I know, building something sturdy with what was supposed to decorate a lie. The Saturday that should have been our wedding came warm and bright in June. I woke up before 6 by habit and lay in bed listening to neighborhood sounds build. A dog 2 houses down. A car stereo at the light. Somebody's screen door slapping shut. For weeks I had dreaded that date, like it might physically arrive carrying teeth. Instead it became ordinary. Calvin. And Joel refused to let me spend it alone. We opened the shop late and turned it into a little neighborhood house day. Lemonade in a cooler. Pound cake from Mrs. Ellison next door. Nico demonstrating how to swap a watch band. At noon, all the old wall clocks rang at once, messy and unsynchronized, and everybody laughed. Near 3 o'clock, while Joel was telling a story about me wearing my church shoes as a boy, I looked up and saw Imani standing just outside the new front window. She had always hated making a scene, so she waited until the last neighbor drifted out before stepping in. She wore a plain navy dress, no ring, no bright lip, no careful performance, just tired eyes and a small box in both hands. Calvin saw her and disappeared into the back without a word. Joel took Nico to get ice from the store. That left the two of us with the ticking. I should not have come on today, she said, but I knew exactly what day it was, and I knew you would too. She put the little box on my workbench. Inside was a pocket watch I had repaired the day we met. The leather strap was gone. It looked like itself again. I figured it belonged to you now, she said. I did not touch it. How are you? I asked, and I hated how genuine the question sounded. She gave a short, unhappy laugh. Not well enough to lie to you. Then she told me the rest. Adrian had not promised a future. He had promised intensity. There's a difference. He liked her when she was uncertain, available, lit from the side by risk. Once the real-life part showed up, groceries and bills and consequence, he went soft and slippery. Then he went elsewhere. I thought honesty was supposed to count for something, she said, staring at my grandfather's tools arranged in their felt slots. I told myself I was being brave. Really, I was being selfish and dressed it up. Her eyes filled then, but she did not look away. The truth is, Micah, it was not the closure I wanted. It was proof. I want to know if you would love me through anything, even that. I wanted you to hold the line for both of us while I went wandering. That is ugly to say out loud, but it is true. I finally touched the pocket watch, just the edge of the case. Thank you for saying the real thing. She asked if we could start with coffee one day. Not dating, not a grand reunion, just conversation without rage in it. I considered that longer than I expected. Not because I wanted her back, though some old aches still recognized her voice. I considered it because there are moments when kindness and cowardice were the same coat, and I needed to tell them apart. Then I shook my head. I do not hate you, I said. That is not what this is. But the hardest part was not Adrian. It was you asking me to cooperate with my own humiliation and call it love. I cannot build new trust on top of that memory. She cried quietly then. I let her. She left the shop with empty hands. I watched her through the clean new front window until she turned the corner and disappeared into summer foot traffic and bus noise and city heat. Then I sat at the second workbench I bought with canceled honeymoon money and opened my grandfather's pocket watch. The movement inside was simple, honest, reparable. By September, Nico was still with me, learning. The apprenticeship fund had 2 more boys on the waiting list. Some evenings I still thought about Imani labeling spice jars in my kitchen, about tulips, about that rust-colored dress. But the ache no longer ran to my house. She asked for one last night. What it really cost her was every ordinary morning after. If this story hits home, like, share, and subscribe for more original Black relationship drama, betrayal stories, and cheating revenge stories told in first person. And in the comments, tell me this. Did Micah make the right choice when he refused to take her back? The part 1 still come back to is not the hotel or even the ring on the table. It is the legal pad, the garment boxes, and that second workbench bought with money meant for a wedding. Boundaries are not revenge because they are loud. They are revenge because they refuse to let betrayal rewrite your standards. She had to face what her choice exposed. I had to face what I would and would not carry forward. That is the quieter kind of accountability, and it lasts longer. The end.